A dream is not imagination, it is a responsibility to create a better future. Many people misunderstand dreams as simple wishes, pleasant thoughts we hold in our minds when reality feels too hard. But a true dream is far more than that. A real dream carries weight. It places a duty on the heart and a mission on the soul. It is not meant to stay silent inside us. It is meant to guide our actions, shape our choices, and push us forward even when the path feels uncertain. A dream begins as a vision of what could be better than what currently exists. It is born when you look at injustice and refuse to accept it as normal, when you see suffering and decide it should not be permanent. This kind of dream does not allow comfort to become an excuse. Instead, it challenges us to rise, to grow, and to take ownership of the future we want to see. A dream asks a simple but powerful question: if not you, then who? Carrying a dream means accepting responsibility. Responsibility to speak when silence feels easier. Responsibility to act when waiting seems safer. Responsibility to keep moving forward even when progress is slow and opposition is strong. Dreams demand effort, sacrifice, and patience. They do not promise immediate success, but they promise purpose. And purpose gives strength to endure moments of doubt and fatigue. Many people give up on their dreams because they expect instant results. When change does not come quickly, discouragement sets in. But a true dream understands time. It understands that meaningful transformation is built step by step, choice by choice, day by day. Just as a seed does not become a tree overnight, a dream does not become reality without persistence. The responsibility of a dream is to keep you committed even when the results are not yet visible. A dream also requires discipline. It asks you to align your daily behavior with your long-term vision. It reminds you that words without action are empty and intention without effort is powerless. Every small decision, how you treat others, how you respond to injustice, how you use your voice, either moves the dream closer or pushes it further away. Responsibility means choosing consistency over convenience. Most importantly, a dream is not selfish. A real dream reaches beyond personal success. It considers the well-being of others and the generations that will come after us. It seeks fairness, dignity, and opportunity not for a few, but for all. When a dream is rooted in service and compassion, it gains strength. It becomes something greater than an individual. It becomes a shared vision that can unite people across differences. Fear will always try to weaken a dream. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of standing alone. But responsibility teaches us that fear is not a signal to stop, it is a signal to grow. Every great advancement in history required individuals who were willing to carry the burden of their dream despite fear. They understood that comfort preserves the present, but courage shapes the future. To hold a dream is to accept a lifelong commitment. It means refusing to believe that the world must remain as it is. It means choosing hope over resignation and action over excuses. A dream is not something you wait for, it is something you work for. And when carried with responsibility, it has the power to transform not only your life, but the world around you. People should be judged by their character, not by race, background, or appearance. This idea may sound simple, yet it remains one of the greatest challenges facing humanity. Too often, society measures people by what can be seen on the surface: skin color, social status, accent, clothing, or birthplace, while ignoring what truly defines a person. Character, not appearance, reveals integrity. Character shows honesty, compassion, courage, and responsibility. These qualities cannot be seen with the eyes. They must be recognized with understanding. When judgment is based on appearance, it creates division. It builds invisible walls between people who could otherwise stand together. It turns difference into distance and fear into prejudice. Such judgment limits not only those who are judged unfairly, but also those who judge, because it narrows the mind and hardens the heart. A society trapped in surface level thinking can never reach its full potential. Character, on the other hand, tells a deeper story. It shows how a person treats others when no one is watching. It reveals how someone responds to hardship, how they handle responsibility, and how they act when given power. Character is proven through actions, not assumptions. It is shaped by choices, not by circumstances of birth. When we learn to value character, we begin to see people for who they truly are, not for the labels placed upon them. Judging by character creates fairness. It opens doors that prejudice keeps locked. It allows talent to rise without being blocked by bias. When people are evaluated by their values and actions, opportunity becomes more equal and justice becomes more real. A world that values character encourages people to grow, improve, and live with purpose, knowing they will be respected for who they choose to become. This principle also calls for self-reflection. Before judging others, we must examine our own hearts. Are we listening or are we assuming? Are we understanding or are we labeling? True progress begins when individuals take responsibility for their own biases and choose to replace ignorance with empathy. Change does not start in institutions alone. It starts in everyday interactions, conversations, and decisions. Teaching future generations to value character is essential. Children learn not only from words, but from examples. When they see adults treating others with respect, fairness, and dignity, they learn that difference is not a threat. They learn that humanity is shared, not divided. Schools, families, and communities all play a role in shaping minds that judge wisely rather than quickly. Judging by character does not mean ignoring differences. It means honoring them without allowing them to define worth. Diversity becomes a strength when it is guided by mutual respect. When people are free from unfair judgment, creativity grows, cooperation increases, and unity becomes possible. A society built on character is stronger because it is rooted in truth rather than fear. This vision demands courage. It is easier to follow stereotypes than to challenge them. It is easier to judge than to understand. But courage pushes us to rise above convenience and choose fairness. It reminds us that every person carries a story, a struggle, and a potential unseen by the surface. When character becomes the standard, humanity moves forward. Trust replaces suspicion. Respect replaces division. And the world becomes not only more just, but more compassionate. Judging by character is not just a moral choice. It is the foundation of a future where dignity belongs to everyone. Hatred and violence cannot bring peace. Only love, light, and understanding can. History has repeatedly shown that anger may shout loudly, but it never builds anything lasting. Violence may silence voices for a moment, but it cannot heal wounds or change hearts. When hatred is used as a response, it only multiplies itself, spreading deeper pain and creating new cycles of conflict. Peace cannot grow in soil poisoned by bitterness. Hatred often begins with fear, fear of the unknown, fear of difference, fear of losing power or control. When fear is left unchallenged, it turns into anger, and anger seeks expression through harm. But harm does not remove fear, it strengthens it. This is why violence, no matter how justified it may feel in the moment, ultimately fails. It treats the symptom, not the disease. Love is not weakness. It is one of the strongest forces known to humanity. Love requires courage because it chooses compassion over revenge and patience over impulsive reaction. Love sees the humanity even in disagreement. It does not mean accepting injustice or remaining silent in the face of wrongdoing. Rather, it means confronting injustice without losing one's moral center. Love demands strength, the strength to stand firm without becoming cruel. Light represents truth and awareness. Darkness thrives where ignorance exists. When people do not understand one another, assumptions replace facts, and fear replaces empathy. Light challenges false narratives, it exposes lies, reveals shared humanity, and opens the door to dialogue. Education, honest conversation, and open hearts act as light, breaking down barriers that hatred builds. Understanding is the bridge between conflict and peace. It requires listening, not to respond, but to truly hear. Understanding does not require agreement, it requires respect. When people take time to understand one another's struggles, histories, and hopes, hostility loses its grip. Even deep disagreements become manageable when guided by mutual respect. Responding with love and understanding does not guarantee immediate change. It is often a slow and demanding path. There will be moments when choosing peace feels unfair, when anger feels justified, and when retaliation seems easier. But the purpose of peace is not convenience, it is transformation. True peace changes hearts, not just outcomes. Violence leaves scars that last generations. Children inherit the pain of conflicts they did not start. Communities remain divided long after battles end. Love, on the other hand, leaves legacies of healing. It teaches future generations that strength does not come from domination, but from unity. That dignity is preserved not by harming others, but by uplifting them. Choosing love in a world filled with hostility is an act of leadership. It challenges others to rise above their worst instincts. It disrupts the expected cycle of retaliation and opens the possibility of reconciliation. Every time someone responds to hatred with grace, they weaken its power. Peace is not passive. It requires active commitment, constant effort, and moral clarity. It calls people to speak truth firmly but respectfully, to resist injustice without becoming unjust themselves. It asks us to protect our values even when emotions run high. In the end, hatred consumes the one who carries it. Violence destroys both sides of a conflict. But love, light, and understanding create space for healing, growth, and lasting change. They do not erase struggle, but they give it meaning. They remind us that the goal is not to defeat one another, but to build a future where peace is stronger than fear. Justice should be equal for everyone and become a living reality, not just an idea. Too often, justice is spoken about as a promise written on paper rather than a principle practiced in daily life. Laws may exist, words may be powerful, and ideals may sound noble, but justice means little if it is not felt by ordinary people in their everyday experiences. Real justice is not measured by speeches or policies alone. It is measured by fairness, dignity, and equal treatment in action. When justice is selective, society becomes unbalanced. If fairness is available only to the powerful or privileged, trust begins to disappear. People lose faith in systems that claim equality but deliver inequality. This gap between promise and reality creates frustration, anger, and division. Justice cannot survive where double standards exist. It must apply to everyone without exception, or it becomes injustice in disguise. True justice protects the vulnerable. It ensures that no one is ignored because of their background, status, or lack of influence. It stands as a shield for those who have no voice, and as a reminder to those in authority that power must be exercised with responsibility. When justice functions properly, it restores balance and affirms human dignity. It tells every individual, you matter and your rights are not negotiable. Justice as a living reality requires courage from institutions and individuals alike. It demands honesty in leadership and accountability in decision-making. It calls on people to challenge unfair practices, even when doing so is uncomfortable or risky. Silence in the face of injustice allows it to grow. Speaking up, however, keeps justice alive and active. Justice must also be consistent. It cannot change based on convenience, popularity, or pressure. When rules apply differently to different people, society sends a dangerous message that some lives are worth more than others. Consistency builds trust. It reassures people that fairness is not temporary or conditional, but permanent and reliable. For justice to live, it must move beyond punishment and include restoration. True justice does not seek revenge, it seeks healing. It aims to correct wrongs, repair harm, and prevent future injustice. This approach strengthens communities rather than tearing them apart. When justice restores rather than destroys, it creates long-term peace. Every individual plays a role in making justice real. Justice is not only the responsibility of courts or leaders, it begins in how people treat one another. Fairness in workplaces, honesty in business, respect in conversations, and empathy in daily interactions all contribute to a just society. Small acts of fairness reinforce the larger system. Education is also essential. People must understand their rights and responsibilities to protect justice. Awareness empowers individuals to demand fairness and resist exploitation. An informed society is harder to manipulate and stronger in defending equality. Justice as a living reality requires persistence. Progress may be slow and resistance may be strong, but commitment keeps justice moving forward. It reminds us that fairness is not a favor, it is a right. When justice becomes real in action, not just in words, society grows stronger, trust is restored, and hope becomes possible. True change begins with courage, the courage to speak, to stand, and to believe. Every meaningful transformation in history started when someone refused to remain silent. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite fear. It is the inner strength that rises when comfort tells you to stay quiet and conscience tells you to speak. Speaking takes courage because words have power. Words can challenge lies, expose injustice, and awaken minds, yet speaking out often comes with risk, misunderstanding, criticism, or isolation. Many people stay silent not because they agree with wrongdoing, but because they fear the consequences of honesty. Courage breaks that silence. It reminds us that a quiet voice of truth is stronger than a loud lie. Standing takes courage because it requires firmness. To stand means to hold your values steady when pressure pushes you to compromise. It means refusing to bend simply to fit in or be accepted. Standing alone can feel heavy, but it is often necessary. Progress has never been driven by crowds at the beginning. It has always started with individuals willing to stand firm before others join. Believing takes courage because hope is often challenged by reality. When change seems slow and obstacles seem endless, belief can feel fragile. But belief is the foundation of action. Without belief, effort fades. Courage protects belief when doubt tries to destroy it. It allows people to imagine a future that does not yet exist and work toward it with determination. Courage does not require perfection. Ordinary people, not heroes without fear, create change. They stumble, they doubt, and they grow. Courage shows up in daily choices, choosing honesty over convenience, fairness over favoritism, and integrity over applause. These small acts may seem insignificant, but together they build momentum. There will always be resistance to change. Systems built on injustice do not surrender easily. They rely on fear to maintain control and on silence to avoid accountability. Courage challenges both. It shines a light where darkness depends on secrecy. It demands accountability where excuses once existed. Courage is also contagious. One brave act inspires another. When people see someone stand up for what is right, it reminds them of their own strength. Movements grow when courage spreads. What begins as one voice becomes many, and what once seemed impossible slowly becomes reality. However, courage must be guided by purpose. It is not about anger or aggression. True courage is calm, focused, and rooted in truth. It seeks justice, not attention. It builds, not destroys. When courage is paired with compassion, it becomes a powerful force for lasting change. Believing in change does not guarantee immediate success. There will be setbacks and disappointments. But courage refuses to let failure define the future. It sees failure as a lesson, not a verdict. Each step forward, no matter how small, matters. True change begins when individuals decide that comfort is no longer more important than conscience, when speaking becomes more valuable than silence, when standing becomes stronger than fear, and when belief refuses to die. Courage does not wait for permission. It creates the path forward. Children deserve a world where their potential is not limited by fear or discrimination. Every child enters this world with curiosity, creativity, and the ability to dream freely. They do not begin life divided by prejudice or restricted by hatred. Those barriers are taught, not born. When society allows fear and discrimination to shape a child's environment, it steals possibilities before they ever have a chance to grow. A child's potential is fragile. It grows through encouragement and withers under neglect and bias. When children are judged unfairly, labeled too early, or denied opportunity, they begin to doubt themselves. This doubt can silence talent, weaken confidence, and limit ambition. A world that fails its children does not just harm individuals, it weakens its future. Fear in a child's life takes many forms. It can be fear of being different, fear of speaking up, or fear of not being accepted. Discrimination reinforces these fears by sending a dangerous message that worth is determined by appearance, background, or circumstance. Such messages build invisible cages around young minds, restricting growth and imagination. Creating a world free from these limits requires responsibility from adults, families, educators, leaders, and communities. All shape the environments in which children grow. Every interaction, example, and decision sends a message. When adults model respect, fairness, and empathy, children learn that difference is not a threat. They learn that dignity belongs to everyone. Education plays a critical role in unlocking potential. True education goes beyond textbooks. It teaches values, critical thinking, and compassion. It encourages children to question injustice and believe in their ability to create change. Classrooms should be spaces where curiosity is celebrated and every voice is valued. When children feel safe and respected, they are more willing to explore their abilities. Opportunity must be equal for potential to flourish. Talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not. When access to quality education, resources, and support is unequal, society wastes brilliance. Removing barriers allows children from all backgrounds to rise based on ability and effort rather than privilege. Fair opportunity is not charity, it is justice. Children also learn from what they observe. When they see division, they imitate it. When they see unity, they build it. A society that resolves conflict peacefully and treats others with dignity teaches children that strength lies in understanding, not domination. These lessons last a lifetime. Protecting children's potential means protecting their hope. Hope gives children the courage to dream beyond their circumstances. It tells them that their future is not predetermined by where they start. When children believe their dreams matter, they work harder, imagine bigger, and grow stronger. The way a society treats its children reveals its true values, investing in their growth, protecting their dignity, and expanding their opportunities is an investment in a better future. When fear and discrimination are removed from their path, children do more than succeed. They transform the world. A future built on fairness begins with the freedom of children to become all they are capable of being. Progress requires patience and strength because every meaningful journey includes struggle. Change is rarely immediate, and growth is almost never comfortable. Many people begin their journey toward progress with excitement, believing that effort will quickly lead to results. But when obstacles appear and the path becomes difficult, discouragement sets in. Understanding that struggle is a natural part of progress is essential to staying committed. Struggle is not a sign of failure, it is evidence of movement. If there were no resistance, there would be no need for effort. Progress challenges existing habits, systems, and beliefs, and those challenges often push back. This resistance can feel exhausting, but it serves a purpose. It tests determination and strengthens resolve. Without struggle, progress would be shallow and temporary. Patience is the ability to continue forward without immediate reward. It is the discipline of trusting the process even when results are not visible. Patience does not mean passivity. It means persistence with purpose. Those who lack patience often abandon their goals too early, mistaking slow growth for no growth. True progress teaches us to value consistency over speed. Strength is built through endurance. Each challenge faced and overcome adds to inner resilience. Difficult moments force growth in ways comfort never can. When progress feels slow, strength reminds us why the journey began. It allows people to rise after setbacks and continue with renewed focus. Strength is not loud, it is steady. History is filled with examples of progress that took years, even generations, to achieve. Those who planted the seeds often never saw the full harvest, yet their patience and strength laid the foundation for a better future. Progress does not belong only to those who finish the journey, but also to those who refuse to stop walking. Struggle also teaches humility and empathy. Those who have faced hardship understand the pain of others more deeply. This understanding strengthens unity and encourages compassion. A progress built without struggle lacks depth and connection. Shared hardship creates shared purpose. There will be moments when quitting feels easier than continuing. Doubt whispers that effort is wasted and that change is impossible. In these moments, patience holds the vision steady and strength pushes the body and mind forward. Progress is often decided not in moments of victory, but in moments of exhaustion when giving up seems reasonable. Progress is rarely a straight line. It includes setbacks, delays, and unexpected turns. These moments do not erase forward movement, they shape it. Learning to adapt rather than surrender keeps progress alive. Flexibility combined with patience allows growth to continue even when plans change.